All right, so welcome to the Enhanced Pod, the first of hopefully many, and I think we're kicking off with one of my favorites. Let me just introduce him. Um, when I first graduated, everybody that I knew from the University of Cape Town spoke about this guy, Brett Phillips. Brett Phillips this, Brett Phillips that. I was kind of getting tired of hearing his name. Then when I start doing my master's, there's this epic character that has just finished the year before I started, and I hear again Brett Phillips, Brett Phillips, Brett Phillips. We end up collaborating, I think in 2020 or 2021. And for me, he's one of the sharpest physios that I know, an incredibly gifted clinician, researcher, all round good guy. And it's probably one of the best people to start this project off than having a chat with. Mr. Brett Phillips, PhD candidate. Brett, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for the the kind intro.
I think we just want to dive straight in. Obviously, you've created a CPD company, which is not an easy thing to do. Give us a little bit of the backstory of why a CPD training company.
Okay. I mean, it was actually quite a distinct and specific origin story. I was away for about a year and a half in Europe, taking a sabbatical and doing some traveling. And when I got back, I had obviously let my CPD situation slip a little bit because I wasn't practicing during that year. And that was when the HPCSA used to have a two-year cycle. So you had 2 years to kind of keep up to date with the 60 points or whatever it was. So I needed to get CPDs and I needed them fast. I had about 3 months to sort of get my 2 years quota. So I went on to what is probably one of the better known CPD platforms, online platforms, and I got a package of 30 points. In fact, yeah, I only needed 30 points. I needed for that year. And effectively, I finished them in about an hour and 10 minutes. They were a series of old, outdated journal articles that had 10 questions linked to it. The actual clinical upskill value was zero. Um, Ease and sort of ability to do it quickly and get it done and convenience was 10 out of 10. It was super convenient. I sat at my lounge table and within an hour and 10 minutes, I'd knocked over a whole year's worth of points. And I just thought to myself, like, what is the actual value in that? There's zero value. I didn't learn anything. I didn't remind myself about anything. I didn't refresh anything. And I thought to myself, well, if this is one of the bigger names in the South African CPD landscape, and this is one of the more prominent companies, and this is the standard of the CPD content that they're providing, surely something needs to change. Because to be perfectly blunt, it was shite. Um, so yeah, and then over the next couple of months, it just sort of took roots, started bubbling in the back of my mind, and then eventually, I think after COVID, I thought, you know what, I have a bit of extra time on my hands because the whole COVID situation. Let me start putting something together, and yeah, that was the birth of EduPro almost 5 years ago, sort of
That's a
September 2020.
it's an interesting origin story, and I know for people who haven't checked it out yet, make sure you go to eduprohealth.co.za and check out the website. But it's not definitely not a fly by night bootstrapped CPD company. It's the full bells and whistles, and I've been privileged enough to kind of see it change over time. And I think the current iteration, I'm so impressed by it being a a CPD attendee on your platform, and being on the user end. I was so impressed with the online support, the way that the website's built, the ease, the administration around it. So yeah, make sure you check it out, everybody. But just touching back on what something that you said, Brett, about the point cycle and things. Obviously, there was a big turn with the HPCSA this year, um, and that sort of March deadline. Did you see kind of a scramble for people to kind of top up all their CPD points? And then do you think it's a good thing, this sort of change in cycle, or do we need to relook at the whole CPD system?
It's an unusual, it's that's a like a complicated question. I think there's different layers to it. So there's the sort of administrative side of things, and I think the changes that the HPCSA made about a year and a half ago, where service providers provide them with the details, and then the HPCSA upload it to individual practitioner profiles. I think that was a good change. I think that makes the lives of the individual clinician a lot easier. Back in the day, you used to have to store up hard copies of your certificates in a file like bloody cavemen. And then at some point, like if you got audited, you'd have to take scanned copies of all of your certificates and fill out a form and have to send it off. So you used to get this dreaded letter in the post with a big HPCSA stamp on saying you've been audited. You'd have a little mini crisis, and then you'd go and rifle through a whole load of shite that you've done over the last couple of years to try and find out whether you've done enough points. So it was a bit messy before. So I think from an administrative side, I think the change has been good. The fact that the way they're doing it now, and I thought with the HPCSA moving to that, there might be a few more like sticking points and a few more errors administratively on their end, which they haven't been. They've been really good. They're very efficient at uploading the points once the provider send it through. So on that front, it's been really good. I think there's still an issue with the underlying fact that most people see CPD points as a tick box exercise instead of as an actual upskilling. If you look at people in corporate, people that work in marketing, or people that work in other aspects of finance, other corporate fields, they see upskilling as a way of enhancing their CV and improving the sort of product that they offer their company, or if they work for themselves as a freelancer, they see that as an opportunity to get better at what they do. Whereas physios usually wait until the last minute and then do a mass panic sort of scramble for points in the last month before the deadline. So to answer your first question, yeah, we did see a bit of a mad dash getting into March. People started hearing because also I don't think it was very well communicated that there was a deadline. Because since they moved to the platform where they upload points directly, it was kind of like a rolling average or something where you had to maintain 30 points a year at given times throughout the year, and there wasn't a set deadline. And then all of a sudden this year now they had this set March deadline, which I don't know whether that's now going to be an annual thing, that March is the time that you have to have your points updated by, or if that was just a sort of like benchmark, and now going forward it's going to be a moving sort of rolling average of points. It's not really clear. But yeah, we did see a big scramble for points. I just think the way that it's structured doesn't necessarily encourage, or what's the word? I can't think of the word, but encourage upskilling. It encourages ticking a box, so that you don't get penalized.
I think the big nail that you hit on the head there is the mindset around professional development for physios, and I wonder if maybe we're incentivizing it in the wrong way. And I think this is something that I've thought about, being someone that's done a master's, which is a big chunk of professional development in a set time frame, but something that kind of gives you a bit of a platform for the rest of your career, and you going through a PhD now. Should we incentivize these like either courses, diplomas, postgraduates, masters, PhDs, whatever? Should we incentivize these big chunks a little bit more with the carrot of, well, when you finish your masters, your annual cycle goes from 30 points a year to 20 points a year, or something like that? Or if you do a PhD, it moves down to 15. I wonder if that's maybe something that more people would kind of like invest in, because then it becomes a little bit more easier to top up and maintain. I think the other problem and the pushback that I hear from physios all the time is that physios are so busy. Both of us have done work in sports and orthopedics. We're so busy, we're on tours. It's impossible for me to attend courses. It's impossible for me to attend live webinars, which a little bit is kind of rubbish, because even you host webinars on demand and things that people can do in their own time. But the pushbacks, I think, is always going to be there. We need to kind of get a little bit more creative with how we incentivize people to kind of upskill themselves for their own good, instead of just because the HPCSA says I have to.
I mean, it's an interesting one when you look at the sort of incentivizing diplomas or postgraduate degrees. There is a small incentive in the fact that during the years that you're registered, you get an automatic 30 points for that year. So your CPD requirements for that year away from the degree become sort of unnecessary. However, if you actually look at it, if I go back to my 30-point package that I got when I got back from Germany, the fact that that what I did in an hour and 10 minutes on a Saturday morning randomly in October counts the same amount of points as an annual registration in a master's degree or PhD degree is farcical, to be honest. So on that front, incentivizing a degree by giving you 30 points allocated for your registration in that year, when that equates to the same amount of points you could literally get in a morning, that's probably not ideal. On the other hand, you could probably argue the fact that if you reduce the CPD requirements for people doing masters or PhDs, if it's a dissertation master's or a dissertation PhD, they're actually not gaining necessarily clinical skills. The masters that we did at GCT, the sports masters, with it being a coursework and a dissertation masters, there was tangible clinical upskill because of the coursework component. If someone was doing a dissertation masters or a doctorate, they're getting a very niche amount of knowledge pertaining very specifically to whatever they're researching, and they're not necessarily getting a clinical upskill. So it's a tricky one from a CPD perspective because a year in a degree shouldn't count the same as attending, a couple of live webinars and a short course or two.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if it's a research related degree, it's not necessarily doing what CPD is meant to be doing. So there's like strong arguments for either way. And I generally think a rethink around all of this would probably be pretty solid. I think just generally in practice, having a master's or a PhD isn't incentivized. If you look at a doctor's training, if they're a GP, they will have a certain hourly rate. If once they've gone into a subspecialty, they will have a distinctly higher hourly rate. So, there's financial and career progression incentives in other health professions. Whereas with physio, you have a master's and working in a practice, or you have a PhD working in a practice, or you've 1 year out of your undergrad degree working in a practice. If you're not a practice owner, you're working in a practice and you're going to be getting a percentage that's very similar to someone who's just walked out of ComServe. So within the profession itself, there's probably a lack of incentive for, bigger professional development in terms of a degree, because there's no financial benefit to getting them. There's also no career pathway benefits to getting them unless you're going into academics. And from a CPD point, there isn't really many perks to actually doing it other than the fact that you get an automated 30 points allocated to you for that year. So it does seem to
Yeah.
be a bit skewed and need probably a bit of a rethink.
I think that's an interesting point that you linked it to earning potential in your clinical practice, whether you're in the States or in private healthcare. I think that's and money talks, and money is a big incentivizer for so many people because we do physiotherapy to feed our families and to put food on the table. There's a much bigger reason that we're doing this career. As much as we love to serve people, you have to pay the bills at the end of the day. But I think tying those two together would actually be quite interesting. And something that I'd love to see come in the future would be looking at physios almost like specializing in some sort of way. I don't know how or if that will ever happen in our lifetime or who needs to fight that fight for us. But it's something that I kind of, I struggle to wrap my head around sometimes. Like you said, you do a dissertation and coursework in sports physiotherapy, and you think you've got a good understanding of how to manage people, but the person down the road that graduated 2 years ago costs the same or more as a consult, to see them versus you, and the public can't really, tell the difference. A physio is a physio is a physio, whether you do hospital cases or you only do sports cases. I think we'd need a lot more clarity, and it probably does tie back to the CPD and how we allow people to kind of move into certain silos. But there's probably a heck of a lot of work and rethinking that needs to happen before we can get that right. Brett, you mentioned something that I want to just go back to. As a CPD provider or like a business person in the space, how do you sort of balance the ethics of you actually want people to walk away with tangible skills, but then there is some low-hanging fruit here that you could bundle up packages and sell people courses that they can, complete on a random October in an hour and get their whole, year's worth of cycle points. How do you balance the two between, creating value and actually wanting to educate people in an authentic way and the monetary sort of incentives of, putting packages together, getting people to do it anyhow? It's actually not on you if they use it as like a sort of scramble or cramming sort of tool. How do you balance those two?
I think sort of you got to acknowledge human nature, and like life is very busy. So CPD points, no matter how dedicated the practitioner is or the individual is, there is always going to be a tick box element to it. They're always going to be like, oh fuck, I've got to get the points sorted by then or whatever. So even people that are actually trying to get a tangible upskill also have that sort of backdrop of this is a necessity, we need to do it. So there's always going to be that tick box kind of mentality towards CPD. It's always going to be a bit of a ball ache, even for the oaks who are really keen at upskilling themselves. So one of the things when I started EduPro was like I had a very strong policy against fluff content. So like read this article and get 5 points. Bullshit. Like it's not going to do anything in terms of providing some form of clinical value. So like I've had a rule with EduPro that the content, even the ones that are quite accessible. So for instance, now from May onwards, we're offering webinars on demand where you can, watch a recorded webinar in your own time. So that's something you could do on a rainy October evening or whenever. But there's progress tracking on our platform. So you still have to watch the webinar. So you can't just answer the 10 questions at the end and get your 2 points or whatever. So there's a way of monitoring that the person has actually engaged with the content, and it's convenient. So effectively, what we try and do is we make sure that our courses have content that's, I think, valid and well researched and is going to provide a clinician with at least some level of tangible upskilling or something, a refresher or something new. But that it's also convenient and accessible, because again, playing into human nature, humans like convenience, humans like things to be simple, especially when it are things that aren't part of their actual day-to-day job. When you get home from work at 6 o'clock and you've seen 12 patients, the last thing you feel like doing is sitting down to a webinar or, going to do your master's work or whatever else you're doing. So if you can make it accessible for people, but still have value in terms of the content, and it's still going to provide what it's actually meant to do, which is to upskill the person, then I think you're kind of threading the balance of not letting it just be a tick box exercise, but achieving that aim whilst also achieving the primary aim of improving the person's clinical practice.
And Brett, just something that I noticed, and we probably need to start wrapping up here. You've got to leave soon, but you've obviously you're attacking your whole platform with a new sort of vigor again. So Q2's coming up. Obviously, you're starting to release webinars on demand, which is quite a cool feature, but there's also a lot of exciting courses coming out. Just take us through quickly what's coming up in Q2 on EduPro, and then maybe just remind everybody listening how they can kind of get involved.
Perfect. I mean, so it's Q2 is going to be quite an exciting one. We've got a few things that are starting. So we usually do our sort of bread and butter content is live webinars. That's what we're pretty much known for. It's what most people attend. So we will always stick to that because that's our kind of primary, that's how we started. So there will be the usual live webinars. We usually do 4 or 5 a quarter. This quarter coming up, we have you in the mix, making a return to presenting for us. It's been a couple of years since you've done a course for us, so it's really exciting to have you back. So we'll be doing 5 live webinars between April and June. Sorry, between May and June. The thought process, each quarter usually has a theme in terms of the live content. With this quarter, we're going with very much a progressive career building theme with your content. So you coming in to talk about your usual sort of tipple of how physios can progress themselves within their chosen career. And that ties in a bit to what we spoke about earlier about there being a ceiling in terms of earning potential and career progression. So we're starting off with sort of a more individual or personal upskill rather than clinical. And then I'll be doing 3 live webinars that we're bundling together as the clinical reasoning series. Most of the EduPro content is not necessarily tailored towards like practical manual therapy techniques, because research is showing that those aren't as effective as we were potentially led to believe in undergrad. So I think a lot of the value in CPD lies in helping people improve their way of thinking and their reasoning as clinicians. So Q2, very much clinical reasoning based. We'll be talking about how decisions are made regarding what interventions we should be using with patients, looking at how to compile rehabilitation programs for MSK patients, and then also talking about ways of being able to think more diagnostically as clinicians. And then you'll round up the quarter with a little expose on the benefits of technology in rehabilitation, which is huge. And I think it was you that mentioned a few weeks ago, a month or two ago, about the fact it's ridiculous. It's 2025 and our primary tool is a goniometer. I mean, it's a ridiculous situation where you can put an oak on Mars, but we're still measuring joint range with a piece of plastic as our primary tool. So that needs to change. So we'll be talking about how all that sort of underlying technology, that's the technological advancements that have happened over the last few years, how that can actually significantly benefit patient care. And then we have the clinical shoulder, which is a practical course in Cape Town. For those who aren't in Cape Town, we're probably looking to bring that further afield at some point, whether it's this year or next year. We might look at heading up to Joburg or KZN. But that's been a sort of very requested bit of content. Most people struggle with the shoulder. When we do customer feedback, most of the clinicians ask for shoulder-related content. So we're trying to give the customers what they want and provide a decent 10-hour practical course on the shoulder. And then we've got a few bits and bobs coming up. So we're releasing the webinars on demand, where we'll have more than 30 online courses that you can sort of purchase and do in your own time. And then we're also looking to help with bite-sized little bits of educational content on Instagram, things that you can digest within a minute, and that will have a tangible impact on your clinical practice. So we've currently started last week the diagnostic series, so little reels that can aid your diagnostic ability, and then we'll probably be branching out into a few exercise science thingamabobs on Instagram. So yeah, that's pretty much what the quarter looks like from EduPro's perspective.
I can't emphasize it enough, but in my 10 plus, I don't know how many years now, 12, 15, something. It's been a while. It's kind of in the period where you forget how long you've been practicing for. But in that time, I can't stress how thoughtful you are as a clinician, and how I think even I learn something every time we converse, or I attend one of your materials. So EduPro is definitely the horse that I'm backing, obviously because I'm getting involved in presenting this quarter as well. But I would really encourage everybody to just join in, dive in, use the platform, really try and explore the resource a little bit. I think you'll find that it's incredibly valuable and great value for money in terms of your CPD and your professional development. And I think it's a great community around it as well. We've met a lot of physios, just through being involved in EduPro and CPD. And obviously, for those of you who don't know, Brett's been involved in elite sports. He's involved in ballet, doing his research at the moment, his PhD. He's a lecturer at the University of Cape Town. So I think the network that comes with being involved in this community is pretty epic as well. So I would really encourage physios, young and old, get stuck in, connect, network, learn, and it's a really quality tool. So yeah, looking forward to quarter 2 with you, Brett, and hopefully many more of these candid discussions to come.